now we're kind of shifting. We have a couple of faculty, and now we've, in the spirit of diversity and transdisciplinary type of an approach, we have students who are also going to speak on this heady subject of peace. Our next panelist is Ciara Hernandez. She is a PhD student in social psychology at Claremont Graduate University, studying under Dr. Michael Hogg. Her research focuses on social identity, intergroup relations, political identity, international conflict, and American foreign policy. She manages Dr. Hogg's Social Identity Lab, where her colleagues conduct research on social identity, intergroup dynamics, and uncertainty identity theory. Ciara previously interned with the Conflict Resolution Program at the Carter Center and has worked in political opposition research for recent election cycles. She also represents the social psychology subdiscipline in CGU's Psi-Chi Honor Society. In her free time, Ciara has a flair for the dramatic and enjoys Shakespeare. So thank you for that personal tidbit as well. So please, let's give a warm welcome to Ciara.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really honored to be a part of this, and I'm just grateful to be here. You can go to the next slide, if that's okay. So when I read Dr. Lipman-Blumen's model, I thought it was incredibly instructive, especially because there's a part of my subdiscipline that looks a lot at leadership and leadership styles and how that contributes to intergroup dynamics. And when I was reading Dr. Lipman-Blumen's model, what I noticed is that, there's obviously the three parts. There is instrumental, relational, and direct achievement styles. But in the context of international relations or intergroup relations, not all groups have the opportunity or the capacity to act directly, right? So even in international or superordinate bodies like the United Nations, some groups, and in this context, of course, they're national groups, countries, but some groups lack resources, intragroup cohesion, or they lack a perception of a perception of political efficacy on the global stage. And what that really communicated to me was that in those settings, leaning on a more relational achievement style is very, very paramount, because it can do a lot of really instructive things, such as it can, for the states that are involved in completing these tasks together, not only do they benefit from the rewards of engaging in these tasks together in peacekeeping missions or in humanitarian efforts, but they also incur the consequences as well of those actions. And I think that interdependence in a superordinate body like something like the United Nations is crucial in order to maintain an interconnected structure within that body. And I also felt when I read this model that the imbued responsibility from those tasks or from working together in that way could potentially even increase the perception of political efficacy, so that direct action isn't, it's an earthquake, sorry. Sorry, Californian here. Anyway, but, and that would imbue, that would imbue a sense of responsibility, right? This interconnectedness that, that can increase perceptions of efficacy, thus decreasing the necessity to feel like nation states must act directly in specific contexts or within international bodies. But the final takeaway that I got from this model was really, in an international context, that an individual state's security cannot come at the cost of global security. So, or a collection of powerful states' security cannot come at the cost of global security, because then we're all not safe. So, next slide, please. And I'm going to just speak a little bit more about my research in my lab focuses on a lot of focuses primarily on social identity literature. And through the prism of social identity literature, obviously in theory, what it is the self-concept as it relates to yourself as a member of social groups, right? You internalizing your membership of a social group. Obviously, some of the largest social groups there are nation states. You internalizing yourself as a member of that social group, and it then affecting your behavior because you are acting as a member of that social group as opposed to just an individual, right? So I thought what might be more instructive, though, is to just give a little bit more background on Henry Tajfel, who was one of the main theorists within this school. Tajfel and Turner came up with social identity theory, but Henry Tajfel was a Polish Jew who was not allowed to go to school in Poland at the time that or not allowed to seek higher education at the time when he would have had to. So he studied in France, in Sorbonne. And then, this is very sad, but unfortunately, the Nazis invaded and they took him prisoner when he joined the French army. Now, when they took him prisoner, they didn't know his actual identity. So they put him in a prisoner of war camp as opposed to a concentration camp. And that one simple distinction saved his life. So social groups are incredibly important. And sorry, they also speak to intergroup relations, right? When we are in social groups, there are also outgroups that are relative to our in-group. And there can be strife, discord between groups, but what really underpins that is a lot of uncertainty. And uncertainty can be alleviated by humanitarian efforts, it can be alleviated by international bodies, and it can be a driving force for negative consequences between groups, of course, but if we look to alleviate that uncertainty that is caused by things like we mentioned earlier, poverty, hunger, disease, war, if we can alleviate some of that uncertainty, we can also alleviate some of that intergroup discord. And so just some solutions that have been, at the surface of my field lately were, maintaining and respecting national identities within superordinate bodies, respecting the differences that countries bring to a situation like that, and acknowledging them for those differences and celebrating them for those differences. And also the stringent application of international law, regardless of the actors and regardless of whether they're friend or foe, and application without fear or favor, because that adds legitimacy to the international body and the superordinate group that we're discussing. And that legitimacy then affords greater prescriptive norms to the members of that group. And lastly, just to reduce uncertainty, like I mentioned earlier, in a humanitarian context. Reducing uncertainty, like mentioned earlier, I worked at the Carter Center, and one thing that they do incredibly well is their humanitarian work across the world. They seek to alleviate suffering in so many places, and that has a lot of positive impacts towards a more peaceful world. So thank you very much, and I think the references are next, but yeah, thank you, everyone.